Our customary story is around Chof Sivan. I heard the story from a Chosid, the Tzvi Yehuda Fogelman Zechlinu Livrocho, was the director of Chabad in Worcester and the head of the yeshiva. He told the story that Rebbe came to the United States, to these shores, in 1941, on Monday, Chof Sivan. Now, they were expecting, or they were hoping, that there would be a Farbringen with the Rebbe immediately that Monday night, but it wasn't, because the Rebbe was waiting for the previous Rebbe to call him. And I think the previous Rebbe only called them on the third day. So the Rebbe came Monday, and I think he first went in to see the previous Rebbe on Thursday, either Wednesday or Thursday. Thursday night, the Rebbe came to the Farbringen in 770. Thursday night, the Kviyas was like this year. Gimel Tammuz was on Friday. And the night between Beis and Gimel Tammuz is the night that the Rebbe came to the Farbringen, which is something in itself. That the Rebbe's first Farbringen in the United States was on Gimel Tammuz. Moreover, the Rebbe came to these shores on Monday, Chof Sivan, 1941. And then, when the Rebbe came again to the United States in 1947, when he went to Paris to bring his mother, the Rebbe Tzimchana, he came on a boat. And when did he come to the United States? The second time was also Monday, Chof Sivan. Now, one would have to be absolutely blind not to see that there is something here. Both times the Rebbe came to the United States was on Chof Sivan. The Rebbe himself addresses this concept of Chof Sivan. We will get to that, but the story I want to tell you is that Rabbi Yehuda Tzvi Fogelman, Rabbi Herschel Fogelman Zechlinu Livrocho, told the story that he was at that Farbringen. That Farbringen Thursday night, Beis Edle Gimel Tammuz, 1941. The Farbringen was in 770, and he knew exactly where the Farbringen was. The Rebbe was sitting at the wall, which is the wall to Tzofin, which is with his back to the wall, which is, after that would be Eastern Parkway and the office of Merkez Liyonei Chinuch. There were about 20 people at that Farbringen. Let's remember, it's 1941. It's not 770 of today. It's in the middle of the war. There were about 20 people at that Farbringen. This was more or less the nucleus of Chabad. And the Rebbe walked in, Rav Fogelman said, with the Siddur in his hand. And that in itself, they saw, was something different. They didn't know the Rebbe. But somebody walks into a Farbringen with a Siddur because he has to make a Bracha Achrona, and he has his own Siddur, and then the Siddur is with him the whole time. It's something different. The Rebbe spoke about the Gemara, four elements of people that tzrichim lehedes, that have to thank Almighty God. And the siman for that is B'chol HaChaim, 4 elements. And then Rabbi Fogelman said this, that at that Farbringen, or at a subsequent Farbringen, the Rebbe said these words: Wir wollen anfangen mit Messibe Shabbos, und wir wollen einnehmen die ganze Welt. We are going to start with Messibe Shabbos, and we are going to conquer Einemen. We're going to conquer the entire world. End of quote. The same Rabbi Fogelman said. The people who heard that, and some of them haben a bisschen untergeschmeichelt, they were smiling. Conquer the whole world. It's 1941. It's in the middle of the war. Rebbe Fogelman said, you can't even send a postcard to Poland. Poland was burning. Europe was burning. World War II. To think about conquering the world is something that completely out of anyone's mind. What you were thinking at that time is maybe conquering the day. Live a day at a time as a time of war. And how are you going to get your relatives out of Europe? And how are you going to get them some food and so on? Conquering the world was completely not on anyone's mind. Comes in the Rebbe, and he makes a statement. This is what we're going to do. And the explanation to that is that it is the war. It's 1941, in the middle of the war. But the Rebbe saw through the war, through the concentration camps, through the ashes, on the other side, 90 years on the other side. And indeed, that is what is happening today. The Rebbe Shluchim all over the world are transforming the world and preparing the world for the coming of Mashiach. Now, the Rebbe gave out a kuntres, Tofshin Nun Aleph. The Rebbe gave out a kuntres, 1991. The Rebbe gave out a kuntres, Chevetz Chof Ches Sivan Yevel Shono. This is the kuntres. I will take, and the kuntres it was in a plastic bag, and it had $1. And this is what the kuntres said. Chof Ches Sivan Yevel Shonim. The Rebbe stood, and I have in the kuntres a note that took place on a Monday, and Monday morning it was known that the Rebbe is going to give out a kuntres, and this is the kuntres in the plastic bag with $1, and that the Rebbe stood for 3 hours giving out this kuntres. So, number one, we have the story of Yehuda Tzvi Fogelman, the Beshel Fogelman. Number two, as we look into the kuntres, the Rebbe tells us what is Chof Ches Sivan and what happened on Chof Ches Sivan. And that, Rabbi say, is the answer to Gimel Tammuz, with the Hakdome. We all know about the great bittul, self-annulment, that the Rebbe had for the previous Rebbe. In the last 10 years of his life, the previous Rebbe spent here in Brooklyn in 770, and the Fabringens were upstairs in Stalova, in the dining room. And the Rebbe was sitting at the head of the table, the previous Rebbe. And since it was in a form around a dining room table on Yom Tevim, there were some chassidim sometimes that would say a few words. The Rebbe would say something and they would ask a question, they would make a comment. Whether they should have done it or not, that's a separate story. In my humble opinion, questionable whether the Rebbe is sitting. What do you mean somebody is going to say something? Our Rebbe, who was sitting at the table, never said a word. In 10 years that the Rebbe sat at the table of the previous Rebbe upstairs in 770, the Rebbe never said one word. The bittul, the self-annulment to the previous Rebbe was complete. Moreover, I heard this from Chassidim. The Rebbe never sat with his hands on the table. Now you're going to say, what's the big thing? You hold your hands on the table or not? Generally, when somebody sits at a table and he holds his hands on the table, it's a certain form of assertment. He is comfortable in his seat. He puts his hands on the table. The Rebbe never put, in 10 years, The Rebbe never put his hands on the table. His hands were always under the table. And he was sitting straight, like a soldier, looking to his right, to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And that took place every time, whenever there was a Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Purim, whenever there was a Fabling, it was always the same thing. The Rebbe never said a word. The Rebbe never put his hands on the table. Which means, and you see from the Sichas, throughout the years, of the great bittul of the Rebbe to the previous Rebbe. Why am I telling you this? In concerning Chof Ches Sivan, the Rebbe says, in this kuntres, there is a Fabringen of Tovshim Memvov, of Chof Ches Sivan. It's printed on page 37. And there it says, what happened on Chof Ches Sivan? The Rebbe writes, and it's smuge, it's edited and it was checked over by the Rebbe and printed. She'oz is chilot nufu chadosho b'ho'avedo de hafotzas hamayonis chutzo. Then a nufu chadosho started on Chof Ches Sivan when the Rebbe came. Nufu chadosho means a new thrust. A new trust in hafotzas hamayonis. Now, taking in consideration the bittul that the Rebbe had for the previous Rebbe, this is a very strong statement. In 1941, the Rebbe was the previous Rebbe. Nevertheless, the Rebbe says when he came, there was a new trust in hafotzas hamayonis. A new thrust in hafotzas hamayonis. A nufa chadosho. Nufa chadosho is a very strong word. In other words, there was hafotzas hamayonis, but now that was in a different level with the coming of the Rebbe. Strong words. Nevertheless, the Rebbe puts them in because the Rebbe wants us to know what happened on Chof Ches Sivan. And what is the new thrust? In the Aveda of hafotzas hamayonis chutzo. The work of hafotzas hamayonis chutzo is another expression for Mashiach. We know the story. The Baal Shem Tov was in the habitation of Mashiach, and he asked him, when are you coming? And what did he answer him? That when your mayonis, your well springs will spread outwardly, this is when Mashiach comes. So hafotzas hamayonis chutzo is another expression for bias HaMashiach. So what is the Rebbe telling us? A new thrust in the coming of Mashiach. And when did that start? Chof Ches Sivan. Which means that Chof Ches Sivan is the answer to Gimel Tammuz. Chof Ches Sivan is a new trust in hafotzas hamayonis, in bringing Mashiach. In other words, that is the answer to bringing Mashiach, and that is the answer to Gimel Tammuz. So, inasmuch as Gimel Tammuz is a difficult day, inasmuch as Gimel Tammuz is a day that is so difficult on everyone, nevertheless, the plan remains the way it was. Hafotzas hamayonis chutzo, the coming of Mashiach. For a moment, Rabbi say, let's visualize that there is a train. On every train, there is a destination. On this train, it says Mashiach. And the train started generations ago. And the train goes through history. It goes through years. And the train goes through happy days when the sun is shining, days of birthday, people were born, bar mitzvah, chasana, wonderful, wonderful days. Sun is shining beautiful. Days of the first Beis Hamikdash. Days of the second Beis Hamikdash. But the train also goes through difficult days. Days of the Churban of the first Beis Hamikdash. Days of the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash. Days of Golus. Days of Chof, of Chof Zion Odorishin, Nun Beis. The second Chof Zion Odor, Nun Daled. Days of Gimel Tammuz, difficult days, sad days, days of mourning, days of tears. Nevertheless, one thing is certain. The train continues. The sad day of Gimel Tammuz, nevertheless, does not change the course of action of the train. The train continues to the Gulu HaMitis V'Hashlemo. Because Chof Ches Sivan was a new thrust in Afotzas HaMayones Chutzo. And in the middle there was Gimel Tammuz, but it doesn't alter the course of the train. It doesn't alter the course of the coming of Mashiach. So therefore, yes, there is a question, and we're not here to suggest an answer. But Chof Chasivan answers that. Chof Chasivan tells us that everything is on plan like before. And the plan is, Almighty God created the world, and the destination is Bias HaMashiach, and Mashiach is coming, and He's coming now. That is the answer to Gimel Tammuz. And you see from the Sikha, the Rebbe also tells us, this is printed on page 37. A few pages later, on page 43, the Rebbe tells us what Chof Ches Sivan means. And he says, Chof Ches is Kayach. Sivan, in Sivan, what is Sivan? So he says openly so we don't make a mistake. Sheyem Chof Ches Meir Alinyan HaKeach. The day of Chof Ches, Chof means Keach, strength. Ubazeh Gufe HaKeach the Sivan Yalchot Liso. Yalchot, what is Sivan? Yalchot Liso, the third month. The third month that we got Oriont Liso, a triple illumination, a triple teaching, the Torah. So, Sivan stands for Matan Torah. And then the Rebbe goes on, Chof Ches Sivan Meiru Malgish HaKeach the Matan Torah. Chof Ches Sivan shows the strength of what? Of Matan Torah. I don't know how others are going to read it, but look what the Rebbe is saying. One is going to say, you needed the Keach of Matan Torah for in 1941? Didn't we get the Torah 3,000 years ago? And we did. But the Keach in Matan Torah, it's printed here. HaKeach the Matan Torah, page 43, is on Chof Ches Sivan. And if we didn't understand Chof Ches Sivan of 1941, then 6 years later, it's again Chof Ches Sivan. So that should register that we understand that Chof Ches Sivan is the Keach in Matan Torah in everything. And is the answer for everything. In case you have a question, Chof Ches Sivan answers that everything is on course. The Gula HaAmitis V'Hashlemo coming our way. And Baruch Hashem, we saw Jews holding on to their emunah, holding on to the emunah on Chof Zion or the Rishon, holding on to the emunah on the second Chof Zion, Odor, in the year Tafshin Nun Daled, holding on to the emunah of Gimel after Gimel Tammuz, and throughout the years. And now we know, Emir Tashem, the fact that it took so many years until now means that it's coming soon. And now we don't have to wait that long. And Emir Tashem, the Gulu HaMitis V'Hashlemo is coming our way. So let's be together, and let's hope together, let's believe together. There was a wonderful Jew, the Bavlon Pashan, Zichlene Livrocho. And he would say, bei uns in Polen fliegt man zu sagen, he would speak a Polish Yiddish beautiful. And he would say, by us in Poland, he would say, Emanti ki adabayel. I believed because I said. And we see it. Those who keep talking about the Gulo Amitis V'Yashlemo. Every Friday, the father, or whoever sits at the head of the table, says a Dvar Torah of the Rebbe, concerning, and he talks about Mashiach. And you see, we know that for a fact. In those houses where the father spoke about Mashiach, it registered with the children. E'emanti ki adabayel. I believed because I spoke about it. That is the answer. Not only to believe, but to tell it to the children and to the new generation. The same idea, that nothing changed. The Rebbe in the first Fabringen, the first formal Fabringen, Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, said that his administration, that's what he said, that there's a minig in the United States of America when there's a new president, without going into any details about what is happening today. But the new president makes a statement. What is his administration going to accomplish? So the Rebbe said he's going to do the same. If you come to a town, says the Gemara, you do as the customs of the town, the customs in the United States of America. A new president makes a statement and he says, what is he's going to accomplish? And what is the Rebbe going to accomplish? He said, Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu Bepeil Mamish. So therefore, the answer to Gimel Tammuz is Chof Ches Sivan. And what is Chof Ches Sivan? Tnufa Chadosho in Afotzas HaMayones Chutzo. Let's hold on together, because this is the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geulah. And our generation will see Emil Tashem, the Geulah Hamitis V'Yashlemo, with our very, very own eyes, Gesundheit und Fröhlichkeit. Ubagolo Didano, V'Simcho V'Tuv Livov, U'V'Tei V'Nira V'Aniglo, U'Lomata Me'asol Atfochim, U'V'Chesed, U'V'Rachamim, V'Teikef, U'Miyad, Mamesh.